Before he was Captain America, he was built different. And now he's taking revenge to avenge his father. We start off seeing a man and his son walk into their hotel room. The man is panicking and telling his son that, someday, a girl will give him a flower and he has to help her. He tells his son, "My dad gave me a similar talk, but it was about taking a girl's flower. I still don't know what he meant." He tells his son he knows none of this makes sense, but he asks him to trust him regardless. The son, whose name is Nick, says okay, still looking confused, and they hug. Next thing, the cleaner who was out in the hallway brings out a revolver and starts coming after them. She has backup, fully armed men. Dad asks Nick to run away, so now he's hiding somewhere and watching as a bald-headed man, who appears to be the leader of the team, breaks into his dad's room. We hear shooting in the room, and shortly after, the bodies of the cleaner and one other man are thrown outside the door. Then the bald-headed man, Carver, comes out of the room unscathed and says, "Bring his body to the lab." Now we get to the movie itself. The narrator, Casey Holmes, is saying something about special people, of whom she is one, me too, and how they didn't ask to be born this way, me too again. She says it started when the Germans were trying to turn people with psychic abilities into soldiers, so they basically used them as experiments and loads of them died. Pretty sure this is what happened to Magneto. Anyway, governments around the world picked up from where they left off and created what they call divisions, with agents trained to hunt down these special people and take them away from their families, just like we saw with Nick's dad. These people fall into different categories. There are the Watchers who can see into the future, the Movers who have telekinetic powers, the Pushers who put thoughts into your head and can make any lie they come up with the truth. These are just a few. There are also Shifters, Bleeders, Sniffs, and many more. You'll get to know them as we go on. Casey is a Watcher though. The division gives these special people drugs to make them stronger, but it keeps killing them. Literally no one has ever survived it. Division took Casey's mom from her, and she ends her monologue with this: "They've been winning a lot of battles. Now it's our time to win the war." Now we see two doctors stepping into a room where they take a substance labeled R16 and inject it into a woman lying on a bed. She's one of the special people. Carver is watching from outside while a little ball is rolling from room to room. The first woman flatlines, then she wakes up, kicks the doctor tending to her, picks up a syringe, and makes her way out of the hospital, but she wouldn't have been able to escape if not for the ball holding the door for her. Such a gentlemanly crystal ball. Anyway, it would appear that she's the first person to survive the treatment, so Carver labels her patient 0 and orders that she be found. Now we see a guy get up from bed, roll 3 dice, and move 1 with his superpowers. After that, he hits the road and goes straight to gamble with a bunch of other guys around the corner, but he's getting eaten up. Apparently, he even owes money now. He manages to convince them to let him roll 1 more time. He tries to use his powers to manipulate a die, but it doesn't work, so they start beating him up and he runs out of there. That guy, by the way, is Nick. Yes, the little boy whose dad got taken. He walks back home and he's visited by 2 men from the division who are now going through his house, just touching and sniffing things. I need not tell you these guys are sniffs, do I? They're gathering information from the things they're sniffing. I do the same thing. Apparently, they're looking for some girl, but from their sniffing, she hasn't been in Nick's apartment. Anyway, they leave with his toothbrush so they'll be able to track him down if he runs away again. Apparently, they just need to sniff it and they'll get all the information on where he's been and what he's been up to. And people thought I was crazy for buying used socks from girls. Nick now goes and takes his shotgun from the drawer, and he's doing some telekinesis with it when he gets a call. It's a girl he doesn't know, but apparently she can see all he's doing even before he opens the door. She even brought him a toothbrush. How did you know? Oh wait, she's a Watcher. Oh, she's Casey. Interesting. She says they need to find $6 million, and of course she has his attention now. They go out to eat, and at that restaurant they're getting to know each other. They're both not so great with their powers yet. They need more practice. Casey says the $6 million is on its way to them. It's with the girl whom the sniffs were looking for. When Nick figures that out, he says goodbye to her and stands up to leave. He doesn't want to get involved with the division, and a random girl who knew he needed a toothbrush is not enough to get him involved. Casey immediately follows him and tries to convince him, but first of all she makes sure to clear the air that she's not just a dumb kid. Her attempts to convince Nick prove futile, but she says he'll help her whether he believes her or not. While that conversation is happening, she gets a vision. Bleeders are in the market. They start running, but the Bleeders block their way on all sides. They too are looking for this mystery girl. They're ready to kill for her. They pull out pistols and Glocks, but Casey throws something, and Nick uses his power to throw some guys away. Even he is shocked by it. But then 2 of the Bleeders scream and glasses everywhere start breaking. These ones have some Mariah Carey powers or something. Their scream breaks an aquarium and the water takes Nick and Casey away. They're on the floor and it seems these guys are going for their eardrums now. Because why are they still screaming? Nick uses his power to push Casey out of the scene while he's there bleeding. Now the sister of the screaming brothers, who's a Watcher, tells them that if they clap Nick, they lose the girl. So the guy stops screaming. Now we see the girl they're all looking for. Her name is Kira. She's on a boat at sea. She gets up and is making her way through. She sees a mirror with Nick's name and the number 4100 written on it. You'll understand later. Now we see Casey just pacing up and down with some badass boots. She gets a vision. She draws it as she always does, and she goes to find the place. She gets there and takes a flower to Nick where he was lying down, but Casey already sensed a woman there, so she had her gun cocked. The woman says she was sent by Casey's mom. Apparently, years ago Casey's mom did her a favor, and she's here to pay her a debt. She moves Nick's shirt up and does something with her hands. He's in pain for some time, and his mind is going back to that time when they took his dad. But then he calms down and his back looks as good as new. She basically stitched him up. He goes to sleep and wakes up feeling much better, and Casey hands him a lotus. It has some significance. Remember what Nick's dad told him? Right. Good, you're following. They're now talking about Casey's mom and how Division locked her up because she's the greatest watcher they've ever seen. Remember that crystal ball? She's the one who dropped it. Nick says they clapped his dad for the same reason. Anyway, Casey has drawn what she saw in their future, and it's not looking very good. The Sniffs are going to get the girl and the case. That case, by the way, is the key to bringing down the Division and freeing Casey's mom. But that's not all she's seen about their future. Apparently, they both die. Oh wow. Remember that girl they're all looking for? Yes, Kira. The Sniffs have her now. They take her and put her in the car and are taking her to Carver, but she sends a message with her eyes that she has to use the bathroom, so they make a stop and take her to a coffee shop. Oh, I get it now. She's a pusher. She's now putting thoughts into this agent's head. His name is Mac, by the way. She's telling him he has a brother he loves so much but was murdered by his partner, so Agent Mac just steps out of the toilet, goes straight out and shoots his partner. After he does, he realizes what has just happened and he goes back for the girl, but he doesn't see her. She comes from behind him, pours some liquid in his eyes, and tries to run away, but he stops her and they get in a fight. He has her in a chokehold, but she still manages to fight her way out of it and beat him to a pulp. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a beta male. She takes his shotgun, takes the car keys from his partner, takes his coffee, and drives off in their car. Later in the evening, we see Nick and Casey in a cab. Nick is practicing his powers, but he's not yet so good. He takes Casey's book where she draws the things she sees, looks through it, and recognizes a place, so asks the driver to head there. He sees a shiny bead, and neither of them knows what that has to do with anything. As he's going through the book, he recognizes Carver. Now we see Carver in a car with Agent Mac and another agent, Victor, Carver's right-hand man. He's a mover just like Nick. Mac is talking about the brother he never had, and how he remembers growing up with him and how he died. As he's talking, he brings out a little sack of beads and hands it over to Carver. They get out of the car and Carver relieves Mac of his duties and tells him to go home, but Mac still wants to work. How do you like work this much, man? Just go home. Following his insistence, Carver tells him put his gun in his mouth and clap himself. Oh, Carver is a pusher too. He uses his power on Mac and boom, rip in peace. The guys just keep walking like a man didn't just drop dead behind them. Carver now gives instructions to send the beats to every sniff, watcher, and reader in the country until they find Kira. He also instructs that a price be put on her head. Nick and Casey get into the club and I'm wondering how security let this chick into a club, but didn't let me in until I was 23. They meet a man named Hook, who once worked in the Division but was fired after 10 years without pension or even a thank you. They even clapped his wife. It looks like he's a magician or something because he keeps doing all these tricks. Anyway, Nick tells him they need to find a bead and he just pulls a waiter. Does a trick where he takes her earring and gives her money. Then he changes that earring to the bead they're looking for. Oh, to have superpowers. But he tells them it won't last long and refers them to a woman named Emily. Emily who? Oh no, I'm not asking. Her name is Emily Hugh. H-U. She's ex-Pat Sniff. He gives them her address and they leave. Now we see Emily sitting across from a man on a table. The man brought his wife's hairbrush to Emily to sniff and help him find out if his wife is cheating on him. Emily tells him his wife is on a boat with another man, and the husband is still there asking if she's happy. Homie, she's on a big boat in the middle of the ocean. Of course she's happy. Just let her go. It's the name of the game. While he's licking his wounds, Nick and Casey show up and hand Emily the bead. It takes some convincing, but she eventually helps them. Apparently, she even has one of the original beads, which the Division has been spreading over the city on Carver's orders. She sniffs it and tells them where to find Kira. By the way, in case you haven't figured it out, Kira is patient 0, the one who escaped from the hospital, and that's why Carver wants her back so bad. The beads they're spreading around are from the bracelet she was wearing, which was snatched from her. Now we see Kira using her powers to get a ride from 2 strangers, but she doesn't even get in the car. She sights Nick and Casey and just starts shooting at them, but as it turns out, she and Nick know each other. She's saying Division caught her and locked her up, and she's mad that Nick never came for her, but he's saying he actually looked for her. Casey comes, plays peacemaker, and they all leave. They're in the market now talking about the case everybody's looking for, but none of them know the content of. Kira says she remembers nothing from the last couple of days, and Nick suggests she probably had her memory wiped so Division won't track her. The vibe I'm getting is that these two used to date. While they're making eye contact, Casey sees something and draws it. She shows it to Nick. It's the death of her mom and Nick. She had never seen her mom's death before. She says Kira is the cause of all this. She's changing the future, making it worse. Casey suggests they dump Kira. She thinks she's useless to them considering she doesn't have the case, but Nick insists they keep her around. Of course he would say that. Now 3 of them go to meet a guy named Pinky. Oh, where's Brain, boss? You know I had to ask. Anyway, Pinky is a shadow. Provided she stays within 20 feet of him, no sniff will find her. He gets a cool 10 grand a day for his trouble. Pebbles. Average Minecraft YouTuber income. I wonder why nobody complained about the money because they all look like they're as broke as me. They all now go into a room where they're trying to think, but Kira still cannot remember anything about the case. And yes, Nick confirms it. They actually dated. I'm good at reading energies, aren't I? Casey gets impatient and goes downstairs to get some stuff, so Pinky observes bro code and leaves the room so Nick can get some alone time with his ex. Sussy. We now see Casey being approached by that lollipop lady from before. She says she has seen how Casey will die, and she basically just tells her to leave the country. She also tells her she knows they put a shadow on Kira, and then finally, she leaves a message for Nick. She says her family is going to make his brain pop like a tomato. Her words, not mine. Casey starts drinking and walks into the room drunk, and is saying all sorts of things about how Kira will get them clapped. Pinky then finds out that they also have a watcher on their tail, and he quickly confesses that his powers are only potent against sniffs. If a watcher is on their trail, it's only a matter of time. So Nick suggests they split to make it difficult for the watchers. They get some sleep and hurriedly leave the next morning after Casey sees Lollipop Girl and her screaming brothers coming in a vision. So Pinky and Kira go one way in a cab, while Casey and Nick go the other way on foot. Casey says if they don't find the case soon, her mom would be toast and it would be her fault. When she says that, Nick flashes back to his dad getting clapped before his eyes, and then he reassures Casey that he won't let her mom die. So he takes the gun out of her bag and boom, he's going after Carver. Casey doesn't think it's a very brilliant idea, but he goes anyway. He goes into a restaurant where he finds Carver and Victor. He uses his powers to suspend both guns in the air and walks up to them. He's now using his powers to point the gun at both their heads. Carver tells Nick that he has the best watchers tracking the future, and he's sure he won't be dying, but Nick will. He also tells Nick that Kira is their patient zero, and with her, they plan to create an army the world has never seen before. Then he says he'll perish unless she receives the necessary injections, which can only be found with him. Carver now goes on telling him things about Kira and how she will soon be clapped. That pulls at his heartstrings and he gets distracted, so Victor starts attacking Nick. Now they're both fighting with their powers. Guess you can call this a power tussle, but Nick is losing this tussle. Victor is basically wiping the floor and the ceiling with him. He's throwing Nick everywhere. Meanwhile, Carver is now with a frightened Casey. She's trying not to look in his eyes so he doesn't push her to hurt herself, you know, with his powers. She manages to convince him not to kill Nick, so he goes inside and tells Victor to stop the torture. Nick comes out to meet her and they both head to where Pinky and Kira are. Kira is sick. It's bad. Nick goes to see her in the room and lays on the bed with her. He then asks her what's in the case and she says it's a drug, some sort of steroid that boosts their abilities but kills them. While they're on the bed, Casey comes in. She just had a vision. She goes straight for Kira's shoe and finds a key there. They carry Kira and the key to Emily. While Emily's trying to figure out where the key is from, the rest of them are trying to figure out their next step, particularly how to lose Lollipop Girl, who's tracking their every move and intention. Emily cannot figure out what the key unlocks because it's being shadowed. She's only able to tell them the direction it's in. But remember, watchers can see through shadows, so Casey gets to work, but even she can't see through it. Wow, all she can see is that there's a building missing. Pinky says he has never seen anything like this. An entire building being shadowed? Never. On the other side, Lollipop Girl, this time without her trademark lollipop, calls on the services of the Stitch who helped Nick out that time. Back with the pack, Nick is making a plan to make them as untraceable as possible to the other watchers. The plan is not to have a plan, so the watchers can't read their intentions. This guy's playing 4D chess. So the plan is Nick will write letters to each of them and they must not open it until he asks them to. He will write one to himself too, then wipe his memory. Everybody gets to work. Emily removes a tape on the key to reveal the number 4100. You remember where this is from, right? That mirror. Casey draws the syringe and the case, and Lollipop Girl draws a syringe too and goes to show it to her people. She says that this is what the Division are looking for, and if they find the drug, they'd be more powerful than the Division. Now Nick is thinking back to the statement Carver made about the injections Kira needs that can only be found with him. He then follows Kira into the bathroom and convinces her to take the medicine from Carver. He promises to come back for her. She goes, but before she gets in her cab, he hands her her letter and tells her to open it when she starts to doubt the truth. He then goes to hand the rest of the group their letters, and they go their separate ways. But before they go, Casey tells Nick to take an umbrella because it's going to rain. Now Pinky goes and hands Kira to Carver, and Pinky gets his pay from them. I just knew none of those broke asses could afford to pay him 10 grand. Anyway, they take Kira and Pinky opens his own letter. He says, of course, and runs off. Then we see him going to submit the money he just received to Nick, who goes into a boat to meet a guy named Woe. This is the man who wiped Kira's memory. He wants his own memory of the last 2 hours wiped. At exactly 7:35, both Emily and Casey open their letters, and Nick goes on with the wiping. At that moment, the Watcher goes to tell her superiors that it's all gone. The future has disappeared. She confesses that she has lost the connection, and she gets a slap for her worries. Now Hook is arriving at some construction site. It's extremely high. He goes up using an elevator, and when he gets up, he opens his letter, which says 4100. He sets his box down, opens it, takes out a key, and starts looking for a locker labeled 4100. But before he even takes 5 steps, an old woman starts shooting at him. That's the woman who has been shadowing the building. Hook tells her the job is over, and that she doesn't have to shadow the building anymore. Then he goes and opens locker 4100, takes the case out of it, and takes it back to base. He uses his magic skills to make an identical case, and Casey takes it to Nick's house. She opens a letter there, and next thing she's holding 2 guns. Nick wakes up and opens his letter, which says go home. So he goes home. The case is in his room and that Stitch woman appears from nowhere, puts her hand on his shoulders, and he goes down in pain. Then she opens the case, confirms the content, and opens the door for the screaming twins. As usual, they're eager to scream, but the woman stops them. They drop the money she was promised, take the case, and leave. The woman now goes to ask Nick where Casey is, but he's able to use his powers to point the gun at her head, and then he instructs her to get him back on his feet. The twins take the case back and they find out they were tricked. Pop Girl now tears off a page from her book where she drew some buildings and tells them that's where the drug is. Now Nick and Casey are reunited. The Stitch woman is tied to a chair, and they leave her there. Then Casey tells Nick that her letter said to tell him that the division has Kira at a certain address. Now we see Carver trying to get Kira to take the drugs, but she's resisting. He shows her an ID card with her face on it and starts telling her some lies. She starts doubting the truth. Time to open your letter, baby. But no, she doesn't. Back to Nick and Casey. Casey's crying because she keeps trying to draw something different, but she can't. It's about how she dies. She just knows it has something to do with a tiger. She's crying now. She doesn't want to rip in peace. And Nick assures her she won't. He tells her to just keep walking without thinking so she can't be tracked by any watcher. And when she sees a safe place, she should just hide. He goes the other way. While she's walking as randomly as she can, her arch nemesis is busy drawing her every movement. She gets into some dingy room and we see a picture of a tiger on some boxes. Then Pop Girl appears and points a gun to Casey's head, saying she made her look like a fool in front of her family. But then Woe comes from behind and wipes her memory. Casey leaves, but before she does, Woe tells Casey that her mother is very proud of her. Now we see Nick going for Kira. He had called Carver earlier telling him he wanted to make an exchange, the substance for the girl. So Carver gave him an address. That's where he is now. He enters the room and Kira looks different. She looks like one of them now. Carver says go ahead, and then she starts saying, remember that night under the roller coaster? And how that was the first time he told her he loved her? He says he remembers. And then she says it never happened. They only met for the first time yesterday and she used him. She tells him the quicker they find the case, the quicker she'll let him forget it. Nick is bamboozled, and frankly, so am I. His phone is ringing and he doesn't even realize until Carver alerts him. The person on the phone is Hook and he says, my card says you have to take the drug. Give me Carver. So he tosses the phone to Carver, and Hook says, you want the case? You let them live. I'll tell you exactly where it is. Then we see Carver, Victor, Nick, and Kira all in the same car. Nick still looks so mesmerized, but on top of that, he's in cuffs now. They arrive at that building. Yes, that one where the 4100 locker is. They throw Nick in the trunk, and the other three guys get in the elevator and go upstairs. They locate the locker, retrieve the case from it, and Carver orders his agent to clap Nick. But before they even move anywhere, all the lights come on and they notice they are surrounded. The men are asking for the box, but Carver doesn't give it up. Victor uses his power to start a fight, and he's really holding his own even as everyone is shooting at him. He throws two of the guys out the window using his powers, and one of them lands on the car Nick is in, and the trunk pops open. Lucky lad. He gets out, uses his power to uncuff himself, and picks up some guns. But instead of this dude running for his life, he decides to go into the war zone to play savior. What is wrong with us men? He gets in there and is now being thrown around by Victor. See what you brought upon yourself? It's a pretty fair fight though. Both men are really going at it now, swinging punches and using their powers. Nick is on top now and seems to be ready to finish Victor off when one of the screaming twins comes and starts screaming. No surprise there. Victor manages to clap him using his powers, but the screaming is not over. The father of the screaming boys is now screaming, and everything is falling apart. He even self-deletes himself in the process. Victor also dies. So Nick goes up to attend to Carver and save Kira, but Carver puts him to the ground pretty easily and gets in his head, but Nick manages to get over it. He punches Carver in the face and takes the syringe out of the case. He's about to inject himself, but Carver tries to stop him, saying it'll kill him. He's looking at Kira and telling her to look at him and try to remember him. She doesn't seem to remember though, so Nick injects himself and falls straight to the ground. It looks like he's dead, so Carver and Kira leave, but not long after, Casey comes with an umbrella and Viola. Nick is alive. That was not the real case all along. They go and get the real case, take the syringe from inside it, and toss the case. Nick is just finding out that he injected himself with 9 Dragon soy sauce. Tasty. He asks about Kira and Casey says they'll see her soon enough. We now see Kira on a plane with Carver. There she finally takes out her letter. She flashes back to Nick telling her to open it when she starts doubting the truth, and then she opens it. Her letter is not really a letter. It's a picture of her and Nick. On it is written, kill him. See you soon, Nick. She reads it, smiles, then gets into Carver's head. She tells him to put his gun in his mouth and pull the trigger. What do they say about karma again? Oh yeah. Moral of the story? Captain America.